The late afternoon sun stretched its golden fingers across the empty yard, falling over broken tiles, piles of dust, and the walls of a house that was waiting to be reborn. To anyone else, it was just another abandoned home with work that seemed endless. But to James and Diep, it was more than that. It was a promise, a fragile hope that they might finally carve out a small corner of peace for themselves and for little Nee. James wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked over at Diep, who was gathering scattered bits of old wood into a neat pile. She was tireless, yet gentle in every move, as if she already saw not the dust and rubble, but curtains swaying in the wind, a kitchen filled with warmth, and a life waiting to bloom. Nee, sit here and finish your homework, Diep reminded softly. The little girl nodded, her small hands clutching colored pencils, her voice chiming like a bell. Yes, Auntie. James's heart tightened at the sound. He was used to boardrooms and signatures that decided the fate of companies, not to the quiet joy of a child's laughter or the sight of a woman bending over to sweep dust from the floor. Yet here he was, sleeves rolled up, carrying boxes and lifting old wood, finding himself strangely at peace. "Do you think we'll really make it?" Diep asked suddenly, her voice breaking the silence between them. She didn't look at him, just kept her eyes on the broom as if the question had slipped out without permission. James paused, glancing at her. The truth was, he didn't know. Life had already shown him too many storms, betrayals in business, shadows from the past, and the weight of responsibilities that never truly rested. But seeing her there, fragile yet determined, he knew one thing with certainty. He wanted to try. "We will," he said firmly, even though part of him feared the unknown. Behind them, Nee's small voice piped up. "Uncle James, I drew a flower. Will you give me a score?" She held up her sketchbook proudly, her eyes sparkling with innocence. James crouched beside her, pretending to study the picture like a teacher. This is beautiful, but you let the color run a little outside the lines." 9 points. Nee's face fell slightly, and then James added with a smile, "But since you painted this flower for us, it deserves 1 more point. 10. The little girl's laughter echoed in the half-empty house, and for a moment the dust, the broken furniture, and even the exhaustion seemed to vanish. James watched her and felt a quiet warmth rise within him. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe in something simple, that maybe happiness was found not in wealth or power, but in these fleeting, ordinary moments. Yet, beneath the laughter and the crackle of burning wood in the yard, a shadow lingered. The house stood, silent and unyielding, as if it carried secrets of its own. James could not shake the faint unease that stirred in his chest. Would this place really protect them? Or was it just the beginning of another storm they were not ready to face? The night fell faster than expected. The rain had started lightly, tapping against the roof, and soon grew heavier, drumming on the thin metal sheets stacked near the yard. James and Diep had tried to burn the old scraps, but the smoke hissed out damp and gray, refusing to rise. In the glow of the flickering fire, Diep's face looked soft, almost weary, and James felt a pang of guilt. "You should rest," he told her, reaching for the broom she held tightly in her hands. "You've done enough for today." She shook her head. "If we don't finish the kitchen tonight, tomorrow will be even harder, and we have to buy a bed, a wardrobe. It's a lot." Her words trailed off, but James heard what she did not say aloud. They both knew their money was limited, that every piece of furniture they dreamed of came with a cost they were not sure they could shoulder. He placed a hand on her arm, gentle but firm. "We'll manage. Somehow, we always do." Little Nee, sitting cross-legged on a small chair nearby, looked up from her drawing. "Will we really live here? Just us?" Her eyes were wide, shining with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Yes," Diep said softly, brushing a strand of hair from the child's forehead. "This will be our home." James swallowed hard at that word home. It sounded simple, yet to him it carried a weight he had not felt in years. For so long, he had lived in houses built of wealth but empty of warmth. Now, here in this dusty, half-renovated space, the word home felt fragile, almost too precious to touch. The rain outside grew louder, and suddenly there was a strange metallic sound. Like glass shifting or iron rattling, James froze, scanning the dark corners of the yard. "Did you hear that?" Diep frowned, her hands pausing mid-sweep. Probably the wind, or maybe some loose tiles. But James wasn't convinced. His instincts, honed from years of business wars and betrayals, whispered that not all noises came from the wind. He pushed the thought away, forcing himself to smile for Nee's sake. "Come on, let's get that chicken ready for dinner. She's been waiting for the giant drumstick all day." Nee clapped her hands in delight, forgetting the rain and the shadows. Diep laughed softly, though the unease in her eyes matched his own. As the fire crackled to life again, and the scent of roasting meat filled the damp air, James let himself pretend for a while. He laughed when Nee begged for the biggest piece, teased Diep about being the better cook, and allowed the illusion of peace to settle around them like a warm blanket. But deep inside, he could not silence the quiet voice that lingered in the back of his mind. The joy is not complete. Something is missing. Something is coming. And as the rain poured harder against the fragile roof, James knew that the new house might not bring them the peace they hoped for. Instead, it might test their love and their strength in ways they could not yet imagine. The storm lasted through the night, and by morning the house smelled faintly of smoke and damp earth. James barely slept, his mind turned over the sound he'd heard, the clink of glass, the rattle of iron. He told himself it was nothing, just the rain disturbing forgotten scraps. But a man like James could not ignore instinct. Instinct had saved him too many times before. Diep, however, woke early, full of determination. She tied her hair back and looked around the half-cleared space with bright eyes. "If we finish the living room today, we can move some things in by tomorrow," she said, her voice carrying that stubborn optimism that always made James both proud and worried. Little Nee hummed a tune nearby, her voice high and pure as she practiced the song her teacher had given her. She was too young to sense the tension in James's silence, too innocent to notice how his eyes kept flicking toward the broken windows and the shadows at the edge of the yard. "Uncle James," she called, holding up a drawing of a bird. "Look, I made it fly this time." James forced a smile and knelt beside her. "You did well, Nee. Very well. But remember, wings must be light. If you press too hard, they won't look like they can fly." Her giggle was a balm to his restless heart. He ruffled her hair and stood, catching Diep's gaze from across the room. For a fleeting second, he wished life could stay this simple. A broom in her hand, a crayon in Nee's, and the three of them building something ordinary yet beautiful. But peace was never simple. Later that afternoon, as James carried a pile of old wood outside, his eyes caught something in the mud near the gate, a footprint, larger than his own, pressed deep into the wet ground. His chest tightened. He knew every worker and neighbor who had stepped onto this property yesterday. This print did not belong to any of them. He crouched, running a finger over the damp edges. Fresh. Whoever it was had been there after the rain, long after they had stopped working. James's mind raced. Was it just a wanderer from the village, or someone watching them, testing the silence of their new home? He straightened, scanning the empty road beyond the gate. Nothing moved. When he returned inside, Diep was carefully folding old cloths into a basket. She looked up, reading the storm in his eyes instantly. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low. He wanted to tell her, but Nee came bounding into the room, holding another drawing, her eyes full of light. "Look, I drew our new house, all clean." James forced the shadow from his face, taking the paper in his hands. "It's perfect," he whispered, though the drawing showed a house brighter than the one they stood in now. But as he watched Nee laugh and Diep smile, a vow formed in his chest, silent and unyielding. No matter what danger lingered outside, he would not let it reach them. This house was supposed to be their sanctuary, their chance to breathe again, and he would protect it even if it meant standing against the darkness alone. Still, the unease remained, growing heavier with every passing hour. The joy of building a home together was real, but so was the shadow pressing quietly against their fragile walls. The question lingered, unspoken, but sharpened James's heart. Would the house bring peace or draw? trouble to their very doorstep. The days that followed were filled with both progress and unease. Bit by bit, the old house began to change. Dust gave way to polished wood, and broken corners found new life under Diep's careful hands. Nee's laughter became the soundtrack of every afternoon as she sketched flowers, birds, and bright windows, always dreaming ahead of what their home would look like. On the surface, everything seemed hopeful. Yet James could not shake the feeling that the walls themselves were listening, that the silence outside was not empty but watchful. Every creak of wood at night, every gust of wind against the shutters set his nerves alight. The footprint at the gate haunted him, an invisible reminder that peace could be broken at any moment. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in bruised shades of purple, James prepared the small fire in the yard to cook dinner. Diep returned from the neighbors with borrowed tools, and Nee chased after fireflies, her laughter spilling into the air. It almost felt perfect too. Perfect. Then came the sound again, a faint scrape of metal against stone. James's head snapped toward the gate. In the fading light, he caught the flicker of movement, someone retreating into the shadows beyond the fence. His chest tightened. This was no imagination. Someone was watching them. James Diep's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood by the doorway, concern shadowing her face. "What is it?" He didn't answer immediately. He couldn't, not with Nee twirling nearby, humming to herself, her small world unbroken by fear. Finally, he forced his voice steady. "Nothing, just the wind." But his hands told a different story as he tightened his grip on the stick he held, knuckles white. That night, the rain returned, heavier than before. The roof rattled, and water slipped through cracks they hadn't yet repaired. Diep huddled with Nee in one corner, comforting her with quiet words. James sat awake by the window, his body tense, eyes fixed on the dark yard. He refused to let sleep claim him. And then, through the veil of rain, he saw the faint glow of a cigarette burning in the distance, beyond the fence. Someone was there, watching, waiting. A surge of anger and fear rose in him. This house was supposed to be their sanctuary, their chance to start over. Whoever lingered in the shadows threatened not just their peace, but their very safety. James clenched his jaw, a vow sharpening inside him like steel. He could not allow fear to creep into Diep's eyes or steal the laughter from Nee's lips. The new house might not have brought them peace yet, but it had given him something else, something stronger. A reason to fight. He whispered to himself, almost like a prayer, "Not here, not to them. I won't let anyone take this away." Outside, the cigarette ember faded into the night. But James knew this was only the beginning. The storm had not passed, it was only gathering.